And on the phone, we have a special guest, Dale Baer, who is, how would you describe yourself?
No.
Once Disney animator or all?
Yeah, you can say once Disney animator because that's what I was,
Yeah.
so.
You started off on Robin Hood in like the 1970s, working as an in-betweener?
Well, 1971, I got started at Disney, and they were in the midst of getting Robin Hood off the ground when I passed the trainee test, which was a 3-week little stint to see what you could do, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I was put into doing in-betweens and rough in-betweens or clean-up in-betweens, and then I could, if I wanted to animate anything, I had to do it on my own time. So I would get to work there at 5 in the morning and work till 9 o'clock at night, and during the day I would do my day job, and early in the morning or late at night I would try to pick something to animate and try to show them what I can do. Finally, they were actually giving me some animation to do here and there on that picture, so that was exciting to me.
And then from there, you went on to Rescuers, and you went on to Winnie the Pooh and Pete's Dragon.
After we got started on Rescuers, and I was starting to do more and more animation and less, in-between type stuff on it. Although when you needed to do it to help get the picture done, you jumped in and did whatever needed to be done. So because it was a relatively small crew compared to a staff today on a film. So we would, got started on Rescuers, and I was starting to do more and more animation and less, in-between type stuff on it. Although when you needed to do it to help get the picture done, you jumped in and did whatever needed to be done. So because it was a relatively small crew compared to a staff today on a film. And in fact, when you look at the screen credits on like something like Robin Hood and Rescuers, that was pretty much it. Outside of now they list all the painters and whoever and the babies that were born during the production and stuff like that, and and the guy who runs the coffee, Oh
yeah, I need him. Yeah.
So, but back then, that was it. That was your crew. Each animator had maybe one assistant. Now you have like an army of them, and so it was amazing to look at films back then. And granted, they're simpler, they're a little bit more charming to me, but it's kind of amazing that we could get out of a feature like that. And yet you look at screen credits now, and it's like takes up the time that goes by. It's like half the length of the movie. There's so many people on it. Technical people, everything. But I like the simpler times. I really do. We went out and saw Mary Poppins Returns, and they did a wonderful job with it. Honestly, they did. They kept the flavor of the old, but it surpassed it so much. But for some reason, I like the simplicity of the original one. Even when they went into the chalk drawing and stuff like that, and the way they handled the backgrounds in that, and there were fewer characters, so it was a simpler story. And the balance of songs seemed to be just right and stuff like that. But now it seems like people expect more out of a film, which I think is kind of sad. It's like we went out and saw Fantastic Beasts, the second one.
Oh, yeah.
And there were so many characters being introduced in that that you had no idea who they were. And you never got to know them. They just kept throwing these characters at you. And the situation with certain characters would only last so long. Then it was over. And so to me, unless you were a big... say Harry Potter fan and read all the books as a kid, and knew every little situation, every character, every whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only kind of people that would understand the stories, I think. So I was totally lost. I was completely lost, so.
Did you see the first one?
Yeah, I did, and I was lost in that one too.
Yeah.
Because there's just so much that goes on in them, you know, that it's even with Harry Potter, you have a lot of characters, but over time you got to know them.
Right.
And you understand, they kept the situation going where you could follow it, from the beginning to the end. Here they would start something, and then it would just end, and then they move on to something else. And like I say, they just kept introducing one character after another, and you had no idea who these people were, So.
Wow.
But that's me.
Yeah.
That's me. I mean, like I said, I never read the book, so I'm getting introduced to them for the first time.
Oh, okay.
And so that's what makes it harder for somebody like me who's unfamiliar with it, But see, I'm from an earlier time, where films were a little simpler, and they didn't kind of confuse you with a lot of stuff. Now it almost wears you out to watch a movie today, because there's so much happening, and it's such a fast pace. Plus, it's 2.5 hours long too on top of it, and whereas they put a time limit on an animated feature, no more than like 80 minutes, 75 to 80 minutes, because people are going to get bored with it, after a certain amount of time, but if it's done well, people aren't going to get bored with it, so.
So you worked at Disney on those movies, and then you kind of went off and you worked on Lord of the Rings with Ralph Bakshi?
Well, there was a situation that happened at Disney, which I won't go into too much detail on, because I don't want to get any of us in trouble. But
thank you.
Well, there was a lot of young people moving into the business, and a lot of them felt that they could do better, and they wanted to take over, basically. And I wasn't ready for the 6 of the 9 old men that I got to work with. I wasn't ready for them to go. I mean, I had so much to learn. And it's not like you couldn't do one film and you're a master, So, but at one point, in I think it was 75, 76, my mentor, who was John Lounsbury, he passed away, unexpectedly, and kind of left a major hole at the studio, and. Then this young group of people coming in, they were kind of pretty much pushing the old timers out. Plus, management was thinking that these guys have reached their limit, and it's time to bring in new blood. They just didn't comprehend what these guys knew and what these guys gave to that company, and how they evolved animation, over those years. And they're just thinking that they just need new blood, and which is all fine and dandy, but you don't just come in and just start pushing the old guys out. I mean, they still had a lot to offer. And fortunately, they kept Eric Larson there, running the training program, which he honestly missed animating, but he also loved working with the younger people too. So, I mean, because he and his wife never had children of their own, and I think he enjoyed that that part of it, helping the young people. And they just started leaving, and I wasn't sort of comfortable with these guys, these younger guys, and and because of their attitude and things like that, and they were developing kind of like a clique there, which you had to really kowtow to them to be accepted into their little organization, their little group. And so I thought, well, I think it's time for me to go, because the studio has changed. It wasn't the same as when I got there. There's you still felt like Walt was walking around the halls back then when I got there. And and then all of a sudden that just changed, and it was getting to be kind of a dark place after a while, for a while there. And so I had a friend who was sort of my office mate at Filmation, where I started in 1970. And I kind of called her. She'd been an old Disney person, too. And I called her just to ask her, some advice, because I didn't know. It's the first time I ever wanted to quit a job, for crying out loud, And she asked me if I'd ever heard of Ralph Bakshi, which I did, I didn't know that much about him. And she says, well, listen, he's got a film out now. It's called Wizards. Why don't you and I go see it, and you tell me what you think? And so we did. And when I saw it, it wasn't quite the film that I was used to doing, but I admired the guy for his guts, putting the stuff like that up on this big screen, And I kind of admired him for that. And I thought, well, can't hurt to go and talk to him, So anyway, I set up an appointment with him and went in and to talk to him, and he wanted to hire me and double my salary basically from what I was making at Disney, and was going to put me in charge of just character layout, and which I didn't mind doing. And they were starting on Lord of the Rings, and so I was sort of getting in on the ground floor of a film, and I enjoyed it. I actually enjoyed working with him. As crazy as he was, I enjoyed him, and we still talk to each other on occasion. So we've had a good rapport with each other, and so it was kind of a nice to get away, and nice to find out that there's life outside of Disney too,
right?
At the time. And then a layoff time was coming with Ralph after Rings, and we helped get out one other film. I think it was Hey Good Looking, and then it was time to lay everybody off, and I wasn't quite sure what to do, but I had met Richard Williams, because he used to come into Disney all the time to talk to Frank and Ollie and Milt, and so I kind of offhandedly got to know him when he would come into the studio, and so I gave him a call and wound up going over to his place after Ralph. So I haven't had any, from the time I started in this business to now, I've never had any downtime in this business, which is unbelievable to me. And so I worked with Ralph for about a year and a half, and I had a house in Burbank that I bought, and I had gotten married around that a few years before, and so at one point I just decided to sell the house and live off the revenue of the house and try to make our own film, and which we were working really hard at trying to do, and picking up some odd jobs here and there, like storyboard work for Hanna-Barbera and things, and working for Bill Melendez on Charlie Brown and stuff like that, but for the most part, just wanting to kind of be out freelancing and trying to come up with our own idea, which never went anywhere. But one film we were trying to do got us the job on Roger Rabbit, ironically, and because the industry was at a low point back in 1987, and you couldn't find work anywhere. I swear, I called and called and called trying to find anything, and there was nothing out there. And Don Hahn, who I'd known at Disney back in the early days when he was Wooley's called me one day and asked me if I wanted to work on Roger Rabbit, and I just said, "You betcha."
Yeah.
I'd seen the